StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you're expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative that is go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is you do need to prove yourself. Before we get into this, I remind you of a couple of things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages, guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point. We send these straight to your phone every morning or every week, respectively, depending on which ones you want to get. All you got to do to be eligible to get these is be part of my texting community. It is free to join. So just send a text to the number 305-384-6894. And once we reactivate and start sending those messages out again, you'll be getting those straight to your phone. Again, it's called Daily Motivation, Monday Motivation. It's free to join. And once we reactivate, you'll be getting a message from the bot and you'll know what your options are. You can tell us how often you want to get messages, etc. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. All right, this is the place where all of our trainings, all of our courses, and all of our programs are. You will have to get access to all of our trainings and courses and programs that you can take on your own time. We have a option for that. You'll have to get into a coaching program where you are being coached directly by me. We have an option for that as well. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can see what we have going on and how you can get yourself involved. Again, that's workonyourgameuniversity.com. That link is also down below in the description. Getting into the topic here today, which is you do need to prove yourself. Now, this is one of those topics where I will actually give you both sides of this conversation because there are times and certain contexts in which you don't need to prove anything to anybody. I actually have done an episode on that where I literally said you don't need to prove shit to anyone. And I'm doing this episode right here where I'm telling you that you do need to prove stuff to other people and to yourself. So this is one of those where you need to understand both sides because there are times when each side will make sense, and it's not all the time for either one. So I'm going to give you both sides because, again, as I told you, I've talked about the other side already. So there's a time for this frame. This means you're going to use your wisdom to discern which is which and for which reason and when it makes the most sense for you. So there will be times when you should prove yourself and you need to have that frame of mind. And there are times when you don't need to prove yourself and you don't need to do anything and you can have that frame of mind. So your job is to discern when does that make the right sense for me, making sure that you are being held accountable to not just let yourself off the hook with whatever is convenient for you. All right, this is not about what's convenient. It's about what makes the most sense given the circumstance. And remember what I told you just a few days ago, that the goal is not to be happy. So if your goal is to be happy and have everything be at ease, this is the wrong place. Work on your game is not about everything being happy and being at ease. It's about high level performance and consistency of performance and producing results, which is why we have the university. And in the university, you will be proving stuff, not to me, but to yourself, because you're being held accountable in ways and at levels in which maybe you have never experienced. So let's get into this first point. The topic once again today is you do need to prove yourself. Number one, having something to prove is a great motivator and impetus to urgent and determined action. How many people listening to me right now, you believe you would perform better if you were taking more urgent and more determined action on a consistent basis? You take the actions you're doing now, and let's say you were more urgent about them and you were more determined about them. Do you believe that will lead to better and more outcomes in your life? I think almost everybody would agree that the answer is yes. So this is what having something to prove does. This is not the only way to get it, but having something to prove is one way to get it. So think about times in your life when you fully believed that you did have something to prove. There was something you could point to it, you know exactly what it was, you could articulate it, you could see it, you could write it down, you could maybe even hold it in your hand. I have something to prove because of this situation that's happening right now. Let me ask you a question. What did you do in those time periods? How did you perform in those time periods? How did you show up in those periods of time when you absolutely knew you had something to prove? If you can even think about what that time was, and I think most of you probably have had at least one of them that you can think of, you probably remember the actions you took. You remember the mentality and the energy behind those actions. And you probably also remember how good it felt to actually prove the thing that you felt compelled to prove. Am I right or am I right? Is likely an energy, that energy that you had then, whether it was during the process of doing it or the process of achieving it, the energy that you had then is likely an energy that you would be happy to recapture and use over and over again in your life if you had a strong enough reason to do so. See, the challenge is not that you don't want to get that energy. Everybody who's listening to me would love to have that same energy all over again. The challenge is many times you find yourself struggling to find a strong enough reason to get to that energy. And if you can come up with the right reason, then everything else, all the resources will come find you. So the good thing about this energy is that it is flexible, meaning it can work in the short term, such as you want to win an athletic competition or the game that you're playing in today. You can use this proven something energy just because some player on the other team talked trash to you, or you got something that you want to prove to one of the fans in the stands. That's the short term use of this energy, but it's also the long term energy. Let's say building a career or a business after there was a setback in your career or your business and you had to build it back, then you're going to build it back even better and stronger than it was before. So that's more of a long-term use of this energy. There is a famous CEO by the name of Lee Iacocca. Some of you who are old enough may remember Lee. He came to prominence. Well, he worked in the 60s, 70s, 80s, going into the 90s. And Lee did his best work, the work that he became most famous for, working for the Chrysler Corporation after he was unceremoniously fired from the Ford Motor Corporation. So he went to work at Chrysler. Chrysler was not doing too well, but Iacocca came in and basically revolutionized the company, came up with some brand new ideas, saved the company from bankruptcy, and basically turned that company around and made himself into a business and management icon in the process of achieving what he achieved. And I'm bringing Lee Iacocca up to help you understand that the reason that he was so driven to do what he did is because he was he was pushed to prove something based on the fact that he had been spurned from the Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company got rid of him and he wanted to prove a point. So he went to another motor company and proved it through his success at the new place. And any of you who's ever done something like this in your life, you probably know the feeling. You had a situation that was going one way, you thought it was fine, but then the situation ends up, the rug gets pulled out from under you. And what you did is basically fight back in a way that led to you achieving even more than you had before the situation occurred. Now, that's an example of having something to prove and using that energy to move yourself forward. Here's another example. At the 2012 President's Correspondence Dinner, or White House Correspondence Dinner, I believe is what they call it. This is a dinner where all the media people who work in Washington, D.C. all come together for a black tie affair, and they have dinner, and I don't know if they take donations, and then the president gets up and speaks, and then there's performers, and then there's a guest host, and people tell jokes and all this stuff. Happens every year. It's a tradition in Washington, D.C. At the 2012 Correspondence Dinner, some of you who remember this may remember this scene. Barack Obama was the president at the time, and the president gets up and they tell some jokes, and then other guests get up, maybe the president's wife or other people who work near the president. Barack Obama and some of his guests famously made fun of one of the guests that they had in attendance that night. The guest that they had in attendance this night, this is in 2012, was a guy by the name of Donald Trump. And Obama and some of his guests, again, made fun of Trump. They made fun of the fact that Trump had been floating out these rumors. They were just rumors at the time, and no one took them seriously, that Mr. Trump was considering running for president. And there were good jokes. I remember watching this when it happened. And you can go find this if you go look this up. I believe the guy's name is Myers. Is it Mike Myers? It's something Myers, the comedian. He came up and told some jokes about Trump, and the jokes were actually really funny. Obama's jokes were funny as well. And they were all at Trump's expense. And mind you, Trump is sitting in the audience and listening to these jokes being told about him while everybody's laughing all around him. And many people have said that the jokes told at Trump's expense that night pushed him to say, okay, everybody thinks it's a joke that I might run for president. Okay, y'all got another thing coming. And we all know what happened after that. Everybody loves a great comeback story, folks. Everybody loves a great comeback story. And when you fight back from what appears to be a loss or a defeat, as a great source of energy for anyone who has a fighting spirit. And it's a great source of energy for anyone watching who has a fighting spirit, because they can live vicariously through you because they see what you're doing. And they're thinking, like, if I was in that situation, I would want to have the same energy that this person has. So they want to lend some of their energy to you. So you always want to be, first of all, you want to find yourself in that situation as often as you can. You can manufacture this if you don't have anything tangible. And secondly, you want to be wary of putting yourself against somebody who has a reason to create their own comeback story. Or you don't want to be going against too many people who have too much of a comeback story that they need to make. because then they could make their comeback at your expense. So be careful choosing your battles. Barack Obama and his correspondents in D.C. I don't think they knew what they were setting themselves up for when they did that night in 2012. Again, look up the video on YouTube. You can see it. The jokes are pretty funny, so it's good comedy. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is you do have to prove yourself. Number 2, having nothing to prove leads to complacency and thusly non-urgent behavior. When you have nothing to prove, you feel like everything is good and everything is copacetic and you don't need to really do anything. What it leads to is a lack of urgency and just overall complacency. This is the place that you don't want to be in. You don't want to find yourself in this no man's land in life, because in life, the best thing you can have is just a strong push to move forward or a strong reason to not go backward. But being in the middle is not good. Every human being is susceptible to falling into bouts of complacency when we feel as if there is nothing to prove, nothing to gain, nothing we need to achieve, nothing to fight for. The highest level performers, however, they make a habit of finding or manufacturing challenges to fight against just to keep themselves sharp and focused and creating whatever the next success is. They just go and create it, or they go find it, or whatever they have to do. They manufacture it. If there isn't anything there, they will just make up stuff. There's a legendary baseball player by the name of Ted Williams. He was famous for hitting 400 in a baseball season. That means he would get on base 40% of the time, which is unheard of in baseball. I don't think anybody's done it since him. I don't think there is, but he was definitely the first one to do it. He's gone down as a legendary hitter in baseball. And it was said that Ted Williams, even in baseball, he would come up with reasons to motivate himself. And if he couldn't find anything to motivate him, he would pick a fight with the media or the press. And then the media and press will go out and write negative stories about him as a result, because the media, they're humans as well. And he would take the anger, if you will, from the negative stories that he created in the press. He would create them by being nasty to the reporters, and they would write a bad story about him. He would take the energy that he got from being angry at the story and use that to push him to play at even higher levels on the baseball field. So he would just manufacture this animosity just to give himself something to fight against. Donald Trump, who now has become President Trump, former President Trump, at least as of this recording, but who knows, we'll see. He is a person who I think probably does this on purpose, and he did it on purpose a lot during his first cycle as president, and he'll probably do it a lot if he wins again and leading up to. I'm recording this in the summer of 2024, so we'll see what ends up happening in the fall. But he's a person who creates these fights, and he's the type of person who's looking for one, and he will go find it, and he will make it if he can't find one. Michael Jordan is another example. He's a guy who has openly admitted that sometimes if he didn't have something to motivate him, he didn't want to coast. And basketball is a long marathon of the season. There's a lot of games to be played. And when you're the best team already and you're recognized as the best player, sometimes there are games in which you don't really have a reason to need to prove anything. You're already the best team. You're probably going to win the game anyway. And everybody calls you the best player. What's your reason to getting yourself ready to go for that game? Well, Michael Jordan would have to go and create these. And he even talked about it. He would just create reasons to get himself motivated to go, because otherwise he would get complacent, and he didn't want to be complacent. He liked keeping that sword sharp. So he would look for and manufacture challenges to keep his mental edge on the basketball court. There was a story of early in his career, he was playing against a guy that most people, basketball fans, have never heard of. His name was LeBradford Smith, and the Bulls are playing against Smith's team, which was the Washington. They called themselves the Bullets at the time, not the Wizards, but the Bullets. And Smith scored maybe 35 or so points against Michael Jordan in the game. So he was just having a great game on Michael Jordan. He scored 35 points on Jordan. And the next day, the Bulls and the Wizards were to play against each other again. So in basketball, they call this a home and home. You play one game at one team's home court, then the next day, both teams go play at the other team's home court. And it's a thing every once in a while happens in basketball. So the Bulls are playing the Wizards again the next night. Michael Jordan crafted this story in his mind that Smith had talked trash to him after scoring the 35 points on him. Now, it turns out, actually, I'll tell you how it turns out later. But anyway, as they go into the next game, allegedly, as the story goes, Michael Jordan told Bradford Smith, I'm going to score 35 points in the first half of tonight's game. And I believe he did. I believe he scored 37. It was something like that, very close to it. He basically did what Smith did in the whole game. He did it in half the game the very next night as basically a revenge for what Smith had done to him. And it turns out that the reason Michael Jordan did that is because the story that came from Jordan is that after the game, Smith had said to him, after the first game, when he scored 35 on Jordan, that Smith had said to him, hey, good game, like in a sarcastic kind of way, because he scored 35 points on him. And then he went out and just torched with Bradford Smith again the next game. And again, most of you have never heard of this guy. I had never heard of him except for this story. Well, it turns out in the long run, we find out that Smith had never said a word to Michael Jordan. So even though he scored 35 points on him, he didn't say anything to him. He didn't laugh in his face. He didn't trash talk. He didn't do anything. He just scored 35 points and went home. Then the next night, Jordan made up a story that this guy had trash talked him to get himself going so that he had a good reason to prove himself to this guy and went and basically matched his total in half the game, what the other guy can only do in the whole game. It's a way of he created this animosity, this energy within himself to give him a reason to go do what he needed to do. So again, I just mentioned Donald Trump. He does a similar thing in a different way. He creates challenges in the form of criticizing people, attacking people, or making enemies out of people in the political space or in the media space. He made an enemy of the entire mainstream media. I think we all can agree that he did that, whether you like him or not. He's not doing that by accident. He didn't do that by accident. He did it on purpose to galvanize himself and to galvanize his audience. And I think we can agree that it worked. I'm not telling you that you had to do these things the way that these people who I'm mentioning have done them. But I am telling you that even these high-level performers, these well-known people and highly accomplished people, they don't sit around and wait for something to occur in life that moves them to need to prove something. They go make it if they don't find it. They can't find it, they will create it out of nowhere. Because when you have this edge constantly, it keeps you from losing your sharpness, and it precludes you from taking your foot off the gas pedal. And again, most people who I talk to, I ask them, all right, do you feel like, or they'll even eventually come out and say it if I ask the right questions, I need to be more urgent, I need to be more consistent, I want to keep my foot on the gas, I want to go harder, longer, and more consistently. Well, if you give yourself something to prove, that takes care of all of those problems. Point number 3, today's topic once again is you do need to have something to prove. Number 3, proving yourself is a challenge, everybody. And high-level performers, ambitious people, they respond well to challenges. Proving yourself is a challenge. And this is another reason number 10,000, why I really appreciate the fact that I went through the sports world before I came into the world that I am in now. Because in the sports world, especially at the highest levels, you're being challenged every single day. Because every day you're going against somebody who's really good. And that's a challenge to beat them. Because if you don't show up, then you're probably going to lose. So proving yourself is an ongoing challenge, and high-level performers love this. This is why you get a lot of high-level performers who come from the sports world, because you got to be high-level just to get in it in the first place. Now, just explain this in point number 2. When you're a high-level performer, you accept the challenge of knowing that you will always have something to go against. You will always have a point to prove. This is not easy. It's a burden, but the kind of burden that you like. The kind of burden that you like lifting weights. All right, the way that people with big muscles, they know that lifting weights is a burden, but they like the fact that it's a burden because it's going to keep the muscles big and maybe make them bigger. So you accept the fact that this is an ongoing challenge. High-level performers like the feeling of knowing that there is something that they need to prove because it gives them something to focus on. It gives them a target. That's why not everybody can be a high-level performer, because most people don't want to put this type of stress and demand on themselves mentally and emotionally, let alone physically, whatever it is you would have to do to prove your point. The top performers want to be challenged because that's the way that they get to show how good they are. I'm going to repeat. The top level performers want to be challenged because that's their way of showing everybody how good they are. I want you to challenge me just so I can bring all of my game out and show it to everybody out here, including you, Mr. Opponent, who wants to go against me. You see, if a high level performer is not challenged, then they have no reason to bring out all of their skills, and therefore all the stuff that they worked on can't even be put on display because nothing's challenging them. So they want to be challenged because it gives them an opportunity to show you all the stuff they got. They want it. They want you to do this. And I'm not just talking about in the sports world. Again, you can do this in the business world. You can do this in everyday life the same way. You have abilities and skills that you want to show to the world, but you need to be challenged in order to bring the best out of yourself. Everyone brings the best out of themselves when they are challenged to where they have to bring the best out of themselves. See, you don't want to just be in situations where everything's easy. I mean, it's fun every now and then to have an easy win. But you can't just, your whole life can't be easy wins. So you can't become a success by just getting easy wins. You got to win some games that look like you might lose. That's what makes you a champion. Remember playing basketball sometimes and not being so excited when I would play against players who I could tell by their energy that they didn't think they could beat me. I didn't like playing in games against players like that because what do I gain by beating them? This person doesn't even think they can win. What do I prove by beating somebody who doesn't even think they can beat me? I want to beat somebody who thinks they can win. See, it's not so much about whether they were skilled or not. Honestly, it was really about whether I thought they felt like they could win. Because in the game of basketball, you can lose to somebody who's not as good as you, depending on how the game goes and depending on how they decide to play. I grew up playing on the playgrounds in the city of Philadelphia. There are players who I played against who were not that good at basketball and skill wise, but they knew how to kind of dirty up the game in a way that gave them an opportunity to win. And you know what? I like playing against players like that, because even though I knew I could beat them on skill, they were not going to lay down and just lose just because they knew they couldn't beat me skill wise. They would try to beat me another way. And I like the challenge of beating them anyway. Again, I want to beat somebody who thinks they can win. I want to beat somebody who doesn't think they can beat me. I don't even want to compete against somebody who doesn't think they can beat me. What's the point? What do I gain? What do they gain? All right, they don't get anything. I don't get anything. I don't even want to play in that game. That's why high level performers are always looking for challenges where there's a real challenge, not a easy win. So it's like beating up somebody who doesn't want to fight. But what'd you prove? Even though you beat them up, you didn't prove anything because they couldn't beat you. So you got to be in a situation where you can lose and you win. All right. And you got to fight against something that is fighting against you, even if you have to create that thing out of nothing. Let's recap today's class, which is you do need to prove yourself. Again, this is one of those topics where I give you both sides of the conversation. There are times in life where you don't need to prove anything to anyone, but there are also times when you do need to prove everything to everyone, most importantly, the person in the mirror. Number one, having something to prove is a great motivator and is an impetus to urgent and determined action. Almost everybody I talk to says they want to be more urgent, they want to be more determined and more consistent in their actions. Well, one way you can do that is give yourself something to prove on a consistent basis, even if you got to come up with a list of things to prove. And every day you just go pick one off the list, or you just got one that's strong enough that it'll carry you through years, but you need a reason and you need something to prove in order to move yourself to your highest level of action. Number two, having nothing to prove leads to complacency and non-urgent behavior. This is the place that you don't want to be. Highest level performers are always looking for, and if they can't find it, they will create a reason to pull all of their abilities out of them, so just so they can show the world how good they are, how tough they are, how strong they are, how resilient they are, how they can't be beat, whatever it is that they want to prove. Again, you can decide what it is you want to prove. You just need something to prove. And number three, proving yourself is a challenge. High level performers, ambitious people, they respond very well to wanting to be challenged. It keeps them going. And I talked about this a little bit in the earlier point. If you're a high level performer, you always want to be challenged. You're looking for challenges and you want to go into situations where you know you will be challenged so that you can show everybody how high of a level you perform at. You're not just looking for an easy win, at least not all the time. Easy win is fun every now and then, but if all you get is easy wins, then your blade will go dull or your gun will go warm because you aren't firing it often enough because you don't need to. You want to get in some battles where you got to actually show everything you got, because that's what keeps you sharp and at your highest level. High level performers, that's where they live. That said, text me. So you're in my community. My number's down below in the description. Also, workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's the place. You want to get access to all of our courses, all of our trainings, get access to me as a direct coach for high level performance, consistency of performance, and producing results. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all